It's a day of fasting. Wow, where do we get that from? Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29. This shall be a statute forever for you. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your souls. And do no work at all, whether a native of your own country or a stranger who dwells among you. So no one is supposed to work. It is a high Sabbath. It's the Sabbath of all Sabbaths, okay? And what better way to afflict your souls than to fast? Did you know that there is no other way to afflict your souls? What is the worst thing that can happen to you? I was teaching my children this morning, well, what is fasting? What is it? And I kind of probed them a little bit, and they said, well, it's not eating. So that's right. Well, what happens when you don't eat? You get hungry. Okay, we went through this question and answer. And what happens if you don't eat for long enough? You get really hungry. Okay, what happens if you just never eat? You die. Right? So I said to my children, I said, well, so what is fasting? Why is fasting so powerful? And my 10-year-old said, because you're showing Yahweh that you're willing to die. You see, that's why fasting is so powerful. From a 10-year-old, ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't say it any better than myself. When you fast, the reason why it is so powerful is because you're willing to die to see Yahweh work in your life, to humble your life. Okay? That's what Yom Kippur is. It is the fasting. There is going to be death and there is going to be life within this 24-hour period of time. So if you could, turn to Isaiah 58 with me for just a moment. And let's read a little bit about fasting. We're going to start off in verse 1. I want you to see the hints, okay? To see what time that we're talking about. You see, how many of you, when you're at certain times during the year, your language changes, okay? When you are around certain times of the year, for instance, if your favorite football team or basketball team or baseball team is in the World Series or the Super Bowl or whatever, your language at work seems to kind of revolve around using baseball terms, a salesman makes a big sale during football season, and someone will say touchdown. Your language changes based on the season that you're in. So listen here carefully, and you can see what season we're talking about here in Isaiah 58. It says, "Cry loudly, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet." Anybody in ancient Israel would have instantly thought of Yom Teruah. "And declare to my people their transgression," which is exactly what you're supposed to do during this time period. "And to the house of Yaakov their sins. Yet they seek me by day and night and delight to know my ways. As a nation that has done righteousness and has not forsaken the ordinance of their God. They ask me for just decisions. They delight in the nearness of Elohim. Why have we fasted and you do not see? Have we humbled ourselves and you do not notice? Behold, on the day of your fast, you find your desire and drive hard all your workers." Okay, so basically what's happening is on the day of their fast, they're making everybody else work. They're doing all of the, they're humbling themselves and they're walking around in sackcloth and ashes doing exactly what the Pharisees did. "Oh, poor me, I'm fasting. I better put on white ghost makeup so everybody knows that I'm fasting." And in the meantime, everyone else is working their backsides off for them. Now listen to this. "Behold, you fast for contention and strife and to strike with a wicked fist. You do not fast like you do today to make your voice heard on high." So instantly now we know the purpose of fasting is to make your voice heard on high. By default, without going into an entire message on fasting, which would be easy for me to slip into do, by default, if he says fasting allows your voice to be heard on high, what is that saying? Is he saying that your voice is not heard on high any other day? I want you to think about that for a moment. How many times do we just throw up prayers? "Father, I need this breakthrough in my life. I need relationship, this and black, blah, 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 blah. We just throw up, we're not willing to do anything for it. We're not willing to do anything. It's like going to your boss and say, boss, I want a raise. Any good boss is going to say, well, what do you want for it? What are you going to do for it? You're going to get promoted and expect to have the same workload, but you want more pay. See, if the natural works that way, how much more in the supernatural, where we can't just go before Yahweh and say, we shouldn't, I should say, just begin to throw up our prayers without the faith and proof. You see, this is why we've been talking about faith, that when you prove your faith is when the supernatural happens. That's when there's a transfer of government. That's when Hasatan has no right to work in your life, even though he has the legal right now to work in this earth realm because he's the God of the earth. But when someone has faith, it stops him in his tracks, it transfers the government, and now Yahweh has the opportunity to have the legal right to work in your life. That's why faith is required. Fasting is one of the most significant parts of that faith because you're saying, Father, I'm willing to die for you to hear my voice. There's 7 billion voices crying out to you. I want you to hear my voice, and I'm willing to die for it in a small way. So in verse 5, here's what he says. It's a fast like this which I choose. A day for a man to humble himself. It is for bowing one's head like a reed and for spreading out sackcloth and ashes as a bed. Will you call this a fast, even an acceptable day to the Lord? Is this not the fast which I choose? Watch this. Because this is ironic to me. Because this is exactly what most of us think fasting is. A day to humble ourselves and to sit in sackcloth and ashes. And it can be that. But watch the way that Yahweh looks at fasting. He says, is this not a fast which I choose? To loosen the bonds of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke. It is not to divide your bread. Is it not to divide your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover him and to not hide yourself from your own flesh? Think about that for a moment. He just said food, right in the context of fasting. Is not this a fast that I choose for you to break bread with the poor? What is he saying? This is turning into a fasting message I did not intend on it being. But what is he saying? I would rather you do and believe. What is that word? Shema. He'd rather you hear and do, to believe what he said. In other words, it's this. It's when you fast, an acceptable fast is understanding and belief that it's already done. That these things will happen. That the bonds of the wickedness will be set free. And every yoke will be broke. Because you're taking part in dying. You are entering into this right now. When you fast, this is what you're doing on Yom Kippur. You are entering into the cross. And the power that the cross brought. It saved the world. Yeshua saved the world through that cedar beam, did he not? When you're willing to fast, you are literally, in one small way, entering into that day. So that's the significance of Yom Kippur just in the fast. Fasting is important. Did you know they fasted twice a week in the first century? How many have fasted over the last 30 days? Raise your hand. I know a lot of people in here fast, right? Now, if I was in 500 people in a traditional Christian church, probably 10 maybe would raise their hand. That's how the lost art of fasting completely lost. They fasted twice a week. Why? Because they understood the power that happens in the supernatural realm when you fast.